Hi everyone, before you dive into the episode, I just wanted to interrupt really quickly. You're gonna dive into this episode and you're gonna hear me call this podcast the Holistic Hustle Podcast. And that is because it used to be the old name of this podcast. And it was an amazing ride. I'm so grateful for the Holistic Hustle Podcast and what it served. But recently I've decided to rebrand the podcast based off the evolution of my own journey, my own story, and where God is calling me to go next. And so now the rebrand, which you may know already, is called Wisdom is Wealth. Didn't want you to be confused, so dive into this episode. They were an amazing episode, amazing guests, amazing insights, and enjoy.
So by holding space, by being with emotions, you're practicing the masculine core of you, the ability to be here, grounded amidst any chaos, which is the emotions of the things, right?
Hi, I'm Justin Buonamo, and this is Holistic Hustle. Holistic Hustle is doing things for the right reasons, working hard for the right reasons. The healthy balance of what work and progression and accomplishment and success should actually look like. All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Holistic Hustle Podcast with Justin Buonamo. And we have a treat for y'all today. I have an incredible guest by the name of Q Williams. I'm going to read off his bio here in a minute, and then I'm going to give my own, my bio of him, if you will, or how I feel about him, what I know of him, and just the incredible human being that he is. And then I'll hand it over to him to introduce himself. And I've got some awesome questions for today that my boy Q said, don't tell me. I want to be authentic with my answers. And so it's going to be a fun episode. And so I'm going to read Q's bio real quick, talk a little bit about him, and then hand it over to him, and we'll go from there. And so Q Williams is an emotional intelligence coach for men and athletes whose mission is to help high performers increase their confidence by embodying healthy masculinity and EQ. Over the last 6 years, Q has trained over 1,000 high-level executives, NFLers, Olympic and collegiate athletes, as well as partnered with Yale Football, the Pro Football Hall of Fame, Athlete's Soul, and the Concussion Legacy Foundation. Damn, that's awesome. He's the founder of the world-class method and the Man Up formula, both of which hinge upon a primary discipline of emotional leadership leading to your full potential. He's spoken on countless podcasts, leads international men's groups, and hosts events nationwide. Originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Q holds a master's degree from Northwestern, where he played both varsity football and baseball. And he currently resides in San Diego, California. So that's his awesome background. Freaking incredible. We're going to dive into some fun stuff today. And for my viewers, just hearing that background, you can probably understand why him and I get along so well. But how we met was in a men's group hosted by our mentor, Jake Kaufman, who a lot of y'all know about. And very funny, right after this, he's getting interviewed for the next episode. So you guys are back to back today.
Nice.
And Q and I met a month or so ago, and Jake was getting ready to do breakout rooms. And I had known and interacted with everybody else in the call. And I remember just thinking, like, let him please pair me with Q. Let him please pair with Q. We pop up in the breakout room, and Q was right there. It was just me and him in the breakout room, and had an awesome interaction, became immediate friends. All right, beautiful soul, and very honored to also say Q is a client now at JFF, which has been an awesome and exciting journey to bring him on. But all in all, just a beautiful soul. And based off of the background and a lot of the questions that we'll go through today, you'll see exactly why I wanted to have this man on. So Q, welcome to the show, brother. Wanted to have you.
Yeah, Justin. What a pleasure, man. Super cool to continue to evolve this relationship. And we have so much parallels. And actually, I feel like this will be a really cool opportunity to really get to know each other even more. That's why I like to keep it authentic. I don't like to know the questions ahead of time. I really like to keep it fluid and let things kind of roll off the tongue. So I hope you appreciate the candor. I know you do. And I'll just be as honest as I can with whatever questions you ask me. And that's ultimately what this is about, right? I don't know if I can really build much onto the bio you already put out there, but I guess I like to answer the question, if you really knew me, what would you know? If you really knew me, you'd know that I've always been pretty sensitive and empathetic, but rarely had the opportunity to do that with my masculine friends and really build like a deeper connection. As much as I was an athlete, I was really kind of touted for a lot of those masculine qualities. And as I transitioned out of sport, transitioned into my own real life, my career, my relationships, I was realizing that a lot of that, the term masculinity and the term hustle even like really ties into masculinity. It was really lost on me. I didn't really know where to find my feet, what was right. Coming from a sports background, like how do I leverage this in a useful way that's going to be, not going to burn me out, but is actually going to help me long term in all areas of life, not just in one, not just like cut off the rest of my life like I did in sports. I feel like now we have this access to relationships, connection, intimate relationships, a career. It's more than just one facet of our life. So I know it's what this podcast is about. And I know that holistic is a key word as it is for you, as it is for me.
I love that, dude. You can tell you've done a few of these because after I welcomed you, I was going to say, so tell me a little bit about why you do what you do. And I think that answer right there, it leads into it perfectly. And to kind of build on it a little bit, can you give your definition of healthy masculinity?
Yeah. So I've been on both sides of the spectrum with this. This is a really good question. I think a lot of men these days are sitting on one side or the other. They're sitting in the camp of, I look at these influencers, I look at masculinity, I look at how maybe society views men, and I want no part of it. I don't want to embrace my masculinity. I don't want to be toxic in my masculinity. So I'm just going to shy away from all of it. And I'd rather not even be categorized as all those toxic frames. The Barbie movie was a great example of that, like really just like showing all the toxic traits that some masculine men can embody. I would say that those men, since they're avoiding their masculinity and they're kind of almost afraid of it, a lot of men tend to fall in that camp of like, okay, I'm just going to embrace my femininity. I'm going to embrace the vulnerability, the creativity, the flow. I would rather not try to control or assert myself in situations and just sort of, take a back seat sometimes. Unfortunately, sometimes that falls too far in one direction, right? We've all kind of been there in our life. I, for one, was in that camp when I exited football. I was like, I've been in the camp of the hyper masculine all my life with sports, like literally running the show from age 7 when I made the all-star team to age 9 to age 22. So like I needed a bit of a break from that hyper masculine, regimented, ordered, very masculine in nature life. I needed a break from that. So I went all the way into my sort of feminine nature, right? I wanted less structure. I started doing yoga. I started everything and anything but lifting weights. I was like, how can I have more freedom in my life? How can I have less structure, more flow, more creativity? And I love that time of my life. And there's a toxic side to that as well, right? A lot of us don't hear the term toxic femininity, but a lot of us have that as well. For instance, I've been toxic feminine when it comes to my finances. That's why I'm a client of yours, right? I've been in this chaotic, avoidant, like there's toxic pieces of our masculine nature of flow and creativity and all of those things that can hinder us from reaching our full potential as a man or as a woman. So a lot of what I talk about when it comes to masculinity or like what it takes to be a man, it's going to apply to like all genders really and all sort of like orientations, because this is really about how to be a integrated human being. Yeah. And what that ultimately comes down to is being able to embrace both sides of yourself, kind of like the speed and agility you get in sports. You want to be able to do a little bit of both, like speed and strength, speed and agility. And so that's the same thing as it goes with masculinity and femininity. Like we all have both of those within us. It's just a matter of how we balance that and how we integrate it in a healthy and sustainable way.
That's so good. It's so good. It reminds me of this quote. I think I read it the other day in one of Richard Rohr's books, where it's like, true masculinity isn't actually true masculinity if it isn't balanced perfectly with true femininity. And true femininity actually isn't true femininity, if that's even the right way to say it, if it's not perfectly balanced with true masculinity, right? So like, it's like yin and yang. A yin and the yin yang symbol, right, doesn't actually exist if both aren't there. It's not a true yin and yang symbol without both sides. And so I absolutely love that, because a big reason why I started this podcast was because I used to be hyper masculine, right? And I think I was telling you leading up to this, it was like if I had to stay up for 3 weeks at a time to accomplish my goals, no excuses, no days off. Like I was the president of the hustle culture. I really was. Right. And I'm learning how to embody the feminine side of things a lot better. And honestly, over the past 2 years, really diving into my true, the feminine side of things, to have that blend of the yin and yang. Right. But what I've realized, though, is though we use the term of toxic masculinity, there really is toxic femininity, if you will. And so not something we often talk about on here, but though it is massively important, right? When it comes to finances, kind of like you said, that's, you bring that toxic femininity. And I tell our clients all the time, like, you will not woo-woo your way to financial freedom. I promise you that. Like, though it is very important, it is very important to work on the internal self, because your external wealth will never exceed that internal wealth, right? It needs to be both. It needs to be blended together. You need to learn how to balance and embody both, like you said. And I just think you hit the nail on the head. A lot of the things that we talk about on this podcast and/or things that I'm practicing personally in my life was nailed in that. And before we move on, to the next questions, now I have about 15, but I can't ask all 15 of them, so I have to pick. But I heard it explained, feminine energy, right? I heard it explained like this, feminine and masculine energy, a couple of months ago, right? Feminine energy being like a free-flowing body of water, right? Just going any which direction and just flowing naturally and freely, right? And masculine energy, when balanced perfectly with the feminine energy, is kind of like the river banks. And now the water that used to free flow, right, is now flowing intentionally and with direction and progress because of the implementation of the masculinity, which is the river banks, right, which took that big free-flowing body of water into a river, right, and it's able to flow with intention and direction and progress in a healthy and sustainable manner because of the masculinity that was put in there, which is the river banks to guide them, right? And so I absolutely love that analogy and that visual and that breakdown. And I did not see us going there first, but pumped about it. Because it's just so super important for anybody listening to this to understand you got to learn how to balance and embody both if you want best results, in your life in totality.
It's true. And I love that analogy. And I love the analogy that I like to use is the sandbox. Same thing. It's like you can't have a sandbox without both the sand and the box. The sand is the chaos, the uncertainty, the creativity. The box is the wood. It gives it the vision, the direction, the structure. And without both of those things, you wouldn't really have much fun. You wouldn't be able to build a sandcastle. You wouldn't be able to have your friends over and like hang out and like you wouldn't be able to have fun because just a box is not that fun, and just sand will eventually turn to dust because it'll just vanish into the dirt. So we need both of those things. Like every single human being, everything we do, like the glass of water you see here has masculine and feminine properties, just like you alluded to. So like for us to divorce ourselves from those one or both of those is a huge disservice, So like you're right, true masculinity. Like masculine is a very interesting term because most of us think of like, oh, that means man, or even femininity. We think that means woman. But we've all got it all, that's the truth of it. Now, what do I believe as it relates to how to show up as a healthy and integrated man? I honestly believe I'm not here to tell people how to live their life. I'm not here to tell people like what it means to be a man, but I can give you a framework for what has worked for other men. I can give you a framework for understanding what your personal identification is as it relates to masculinity, how you want to cultivate that. So a lot of the work that I do is really giving people frameworks and perspectives and principles that help them build the building blocks of their own sense of masculinity, what it really means for them to be a man today. So that being said, you have the opportunity, you can either flex the muscle of the masculine part of you, the yang side of you, as much as you want. Or some people need to come into my groups and they need to flex their yin muscle, their feminine muscle, and open up to their emotions and actually process some things and be like, practice what it's like to be with those things. And when you practice that, it tends to strengthen your overall sense of being a man. But I'm not here to tell anybody what they need to come in and do. I think every man knows that for themselves ultimately.
I love that. Whether they admit it or not, I think they do. And I think a lot of men are starting to question society's characteristics of what a real man should look like, right? Because it is toxic masculinity, I think, when it comes to society's view of what a real man should look like. We shouldn't cry. We shouldn't show our emotions. We got to be the breadwinner. We should understand money just coming out the womb. You know what I mean? And just like these crazy standards that really aren't that true. And so my question for you is, what are a few characteristics that a real man embodies?
Well, real man is one thing. This all goes back to a personal perspective, right? The thing is, I've been on both sides of the coin. I've been on the toxic sides of both of it, right? I've experienced toxic masculinity. In fact, my college football program is being investigated right now for hazing allegations. Our head coach got fired. All the allegations are actually just past my time. I made it by a year. I finished in 2015. These are all like second half of 2013 and later, right? So I've witnessed the toxic side of things. I've also witnessed the toxic side of the feminine nature within men, right? And ultimately, I believe that for me to be a healthy masculine man, it means embracing both of those things. So it means that my masculine parts of being a man is I can be vision oriented. I can be clear in what I want. Personally, I actually want to be the main breadwinner in my household. I believe that in my masculine core actually really craves like serving and sort of protecting my family in that way. And I've also been in relationships, and maybe some of the female entrepreneurs listening to this can maybe relate to this. It can be sometimes difficult to create polarity with your male partner if you're experiencing a certain level of financial success or a certain level of breadwinning. It creates an interesting divide and a different like sort of schism that can really complicate the polarity in a relationship. It can complicate the nervous system regulation for a couple on both sides, because men start to question their sense of being a man. Women start to question, like, is this still being a woman, by being the breadwinner, or by like being operating in my masculine so much? Is this still being a woman? And a lot of modern day men and women's challenges for a man, how can I lead and allow my partner to be able to trust my leadership? And a lot of women are struggling with like, okay, can I trust him to lead? Like, do I even want to trust him to lead? Right. And a lot of that in my work I've experienced, most men that you talk to, most men will lean towards wanting to be more of that provider. If you really ask them at their core what they really want, they would like to be the one that's providing safety, structure, direction, and sort of like driving the car, right? Like, and most women would like to have a man that they can trust to provide all of those things, right? Now, I'm not saying that applies to every man and woman. I'm not saying that that applies to every single person. But what I've found is that, I think we all need to be really intentional about how we engage in sort of the new gender dynamics that we're all facing in this culture, right? And how do we retain the polarity and the connection and the nervous system kind of rebalancing in our relationships?
Wow. That is awesome. I think the sensitivity to these things, or the intentionality behind understanding these things to not only help yourself embody them is important, but you did mention like significant others listening to this, maybe listening on behalf of your significant other, or listening to this with ears of like, my husband's going through this, or maybe my wife is going through this and whatnot. But with us being two males here
Mhm.
that, are growing through the hyper masculinity again, I know most of my audience knows I was a college athlete too as well. Did not play two Division I sports at basically an Ivy League school like you, but still was exposed to hyper masculinity too as well. And I think one thing that I really struggled with was finding a significant other that was not even just willing, but capable to help me grow through that,
Mm.
right? To grow to that
Yeah.
next level of masculinity, to shed the toxicity behind it. And
Yeah.
so there are a lot of females listening to this, and I'm sure getting benefit for themselves. But I know also too, probably having a lot of questions like, how do I support my husband with this, or my boyfriend with this, or my fiance with this, or significant other, despite the title, right? And so let's just say there's a female listener right now who has a husband or a male significant other who is walking around right now, maybe with standards, holding himself to old standards of masculinity, hyper toxic masculinity, like we've talked
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
Right? What would be the advice that you would give them to help them support their significant others
Yeah.
through growing through this?
Yeah. Well, the beautiful thing is like when supporting a man with his masculinity or like just like stepping up in the way that he ultimately wants to, um, it's going to help the relationship, right? It's going to help everything that's associated with it. But if I were a partner listening to this, like for my man, if that was the case, I would say number one of the biggest things men can do these days is isolation is massive amongst men. I think 1 in 3 men say they have no close friends. They say that they don't feel like they can go to anybody with anything that's going on in their life, like a close friend. A lot of men rely on their partner for their emotional support, if anyone. And what happens in that dynamic is that it can often create a situation where your partner is the only person that can kind of carry your burdens, your work burdens, your frustrations, And so if you're feeling stressed out, partner can feel that. And if they're the only one that can support you with that, with the venting, with the sort of like, just getting off your chest, you're not giving that person a choice in the matter. They have no choice whether they want to listen to you or just walk out the door, or just walk into the next room and say, honey, I'm busy. It's a lot of pressure for that one person to hold that. And so, this is going to help your life, man. And so this is going to help you in your relationship. See if you can like get in community with other men. I mean, it's one of the reasons why we're connected is because we're part of a men's group together, right? So many men have, especially through COVID, I've seen so many men are craving that in-person and intimate connection with other guys. We just really weren't taught that. Like a lot of guys have trouble kind of holding eye contact for longer than a couple seconds because we sort of confuse intimacy with romanticism. Like I hate to use an old term, but like we used to say like no homo, like back in the locker rooms. I hate that was said, right? Because present day, you would never say that. But that's the kind of jargon that you would have, this sort of like, this, what's the term I'm looking for? Homophobic sort of like exercise that a lot of men will entrance. And so it's interesting, like if men can just connect at a heart to heart level without it meaning something, you can actually understand the other guy, not for what he does or like what his job is and asking him, how's the weather, but actually asking deeper questions. That man can start to develop deeper connections, deeper senses of safety, deeper sense of vulnerability and openness, and support with other men. That is going to fast track his level of success in his own personal life and his own career. That level of support, connection, camaraderie is going to massively change his life. It massively changed mine. I'm witnessing it. You're talking about how being connected to this sort of world, the vulnerability amongst other men. So many men really need that. Now, maybe you're listening to this and asking like, well, how do I get my guy to go and like join something like that? How do I go and like, how do I get him to get out of the house and go meet some friends? Well, it's pretty hard to do these days. It's really hard to do, especially the way that, every man you walk into is probably facing the same struggle, right? So every man that your husband's going to meet or your partner's going to meet is facing the same internal questions of, oh man, maybe they probably don't want to talk to me, or I'd rather just go home and talk to my wife, or I'd rather just go home and like work on the car, or maybe I want to go just work on my business and look busy, pull up my phone, right? Think of how many elevators we've gotten into and we haven't said hi to anybody in them. Yeah. And so I think, like I said, a lot of the concepts I'm talking about today are going to apply to men and women, anybody out there. But we have a pandemic when it comes to men. We have a big issue when it comes to men feeling supported, feeling like they can be vulnerable and they can be open about what they're going through. And so they end up bearing it all, which is a hyper masculine approach. So to open up to your authentic masculine, your divine masculine, you would say, right? The masculine that is healthy, you would lean on support. You would realize that you're not, you can do it alone, but the lone wolf eventually dies and you're not reaching your full potential alone. So by leaning on other people and realizing you are imperfect and you're never going to reach your full potential by yourself, you start to kind of open your eyes to, a real man probably, leans on others. So it's that balance of self-reliance and surrender that we all need, right? But when it comes to like how you actually go out and create that, this is really about emotional leadership, which I talked about. It was in my bio. Like emotional leadership is the underpinning of all of this. True leadership is opening up and being vulnerable with your heart, not necessarily sharing all your baggage with people. Like most people don't want to hear that, especially first thing. But if you can lead from a place of curiosity, of being open with what you're currently going through, any mess you're currently in, what your true intentions are, what you truly want, you are opening the door and going first in those conversations. So entering the next elevator you walk into, what if you make a funny comment, or you just like kind of open the door to that potential conversation, that potential connection? And that is vulnerability. Vulnerability is true leadership, right? It's putting yourself out there, and men need practice with that. We need a practice ground for that. That's what's beautiful about men's groups. Certain styles of men's groups can really help open you up to, and give you a practice ground for doing that, for saying the uncomfortable thing, for, calling it out and just saying what's really on your mind. Something we don't have a lot of practice with in the real world these days because of our cultural, associations.
It's kind of just told my own personal story without knowing my story. What happened, over this past, year or so, which I'll dive into a little bit and explain what I mean there. But kind of what I'm hearing here is, yes, definitely, ladies, support your male significant other or your significant other, as you can and as you please. But for you and for the male to understand, like, they're going to need more than just that, right? And by more, it's going to be a group of other men that are going through similar things that you're going through, or that your husband or your significant other is going through, right? And it's trying to embody this true masculinity, right? Shed the toxicity and really walk into what it means to be a man, what it means to be a leader. And why I said, hey, you probably just basically told my own story over the past year without knowing the story. It was, about a year or so ago is when I met Jake, started working with him in February. And obviously he's fantastic. But one thing that has been incredible is, having a group of, 5 to 7 other guys, right, that are incredible human beings that I'm not only able to collaborate with and lean on, but at least know, hey, I'm not in this alone. Mm-hmm. Right. And that because of this group of males, right, that I can trust on and lean on, I know that I can continue to grow, right? I can continue to be vulnerable and have conversations with them that I may not be able to have elsewhere. Because my dad, who instilled that hustle culture into me, or instilled that male toxicity into me, right, is not going to be the person that I go have this conversation with. Or right. My buddies from college aren't going to be I'm just using this general, not saying my buddies exactly, but my buddies from college that I played sports with probably aren't going to be some of the people that I go lean on to have these conversations with. And so finding that group of people, mainly a men's group, to lean on in many different ways, I think I agree with you, is the key. And I've seen it happen in my own life, over the past year or so. It's been the key to my growth. I call it me growing up, right? I used to be a little boy. Now I'm turning into a man, right? And a big component of that is I had to hang out with other little boys on the path to becoming a man, and so I love that answer. And so for men, I'm pretty sure that was kind of quite direct on not an easy next step, but a community or a strategy or a next step that they can take to really step forward in what we're talking about here. And for, ladies listening, I think what Q's saying is continue to support them, but also realize like they're going to need a little bit more than that. And hopefully some of the intel he gave you help not just support them in the current way that you're supporting them, but also support them in a way to step forward and take that next step to find additional support.
Yeah, you're spot on there. And, let's also look at the downsides of not doing something like that. Let's look at like where it could actually go, or maybe where you might be if you're in this situation. And it gets bad. Like if your partner, if your female partner is the only emotional support that you have, that means that your partner is the one that's holding the masculine frame for your emotions consistently. So by holding space, by being with emotions, you're practicing the masculine core of you, the ability to be here, grounded amidst any chaos, which is the emotions of the things, right? Just be with the thing that most people would just want to fix, and just be with it. Just help them be with it. By holding space, that's a masculine stance, right? And what tends to happen is that can really impact the polarity of a relationship, right? Of a certain relationship, of most relationships. If the woman is creating the space and holding the space consistently for their partner, then she's operating in her masculine heavily. Now, in modern day society, she's not just going to work and operating in her masculine. She's also, coming home stressed out, and she's coming into maybe an emotional situation, holding that masculine frame again for her partner. And so you can see how this kind of has like a domino effect, an exponential effect. And that continued over a long period of time can create a real lack of polarity, a lack of, connection and intimacy. And we all know just like how that ultimately goes, right? So like, this is like, it's imperative for every relationship to have more than just one emotional outlet, right? More than one person or set of people that can hold space for us so that we can diversify, our support. So I can say, oh, babe, I got something going on, but don't worry about it. I'm going to talk to, my group about it. I'm going to talk to Jake about it. I'm going to talk to my buddy about it. And guys, like, by the way, this doesn't have to be a men's group. I do believe that men's groups are one of the best places to get this kind of work done, because there's a set of agreements, there's confidentiality, it's just an environment, a culture of where you can share things that most guys can't share with their friends. Just like you said, I can't share this with a lot of my college buddies. Maybe I can share some of this stuff with my dad, but it's, every relationship's different. Every family is different, and that's not anything against my dad or my buddies. It's just, they're just not the people for me in that situation. Right. They're my people in other situations. So, this can be friends that you, instead of, shooting the shit about, the game, next time you talk to them, or next time you go out for golf or for a beer, what if you talked about things that actually matter to you? What if you talked about like, your financial goals, some of your intimacy goals with your partner, how things are going intimacy wise? We don't tend to talk about these things because they're such taboo topics in our culture: money, sex, all these things, right? So the more we can talk about what we think is taboo, the less scary it becomes. And just by talking about it, often men will feel such a relief. Man, I actually just said that out loud. Just had a client here with me just the other day, just yesterday. And so much of our work is just like him saying things that he's been thinking for a while, but never consciously said out loud or really even thought out loud. But he's been thinking them for years. And just to say them, like he has like this tinge of good guilt and all these emotions that are associated with these things. But just getting them off his chest is 90% of the work, right? So one of the interesting tricks of this work is really simply sharing it and not burdening, carrying the whole burden yourself is so much of the work. It's so much of the work, and it does so much good for our nervous system to not carry it ourselves. And to me, that's true masculinity. That's true manhood is leaning into that support and opening up. I say like the first step in manning up is ultimately opening up. We have to open up so we can step up in the most intentional and direct way. Without opening up, we don't know what matters to us. We don't know what we care about. We don't know what we're going through. We don't know the gravity of our situation until we speak it. We open up about it. So whether it's with a journal, with your friend, with your group, with even your partner, opening up is the first step. Then you start taking new action in the information that you're learning from the opening up process.
Again, you can tell you've done a bunch of this. Is my next question after that was going to be like, where can people start? And you just gave them all, all of those little pieces of advice and where to start. And I think you're so right that opening up is the majority of the work. Right. It's the majority of the work. And it's just especially for, I've noticed in my own experience where I'm, this past year, I'm opening up a lot better. Like when my wife's like, hey, what's wrong? It's not like nothing, which is usually has been my response for years. Nothing, I'm fine. When it's really not the truth. I just didn't know how to open up.
Yeah.
Right. Or opening up was framed to me as weak.
Yeah.
Right. And so I agree with you that an easy next step for people would be to, just pop open a journal. Right. And just whatever comes to your mind, write that out, which I think is an easy next step. And so coming up here close to time, and this has been fantastic. I could tell we already need a part two. But with that said, before I have people figure out where to find you and how to connect with you, I often like to make our experts and our guests relatable, right? And so what I mean by that is, or how we accomplish that, I just would love for you to share with the group, like in the realm of what we're talking about today, like what's something that you're struggling with or working on yourself?
Oh man, my finances. Yeah, 100%. Like when it comes to leading the way that I want to in my relationship, in my future, me and my girlfriend just moved in together a few months ago, and it's a relatively new relationship, but I've been in relationships before where I struggled financially to show up in the way that I wanted to. And actually my partner, I was on the other end of the pendulum. My partner was making a lot of money, doing incredibly well, and was seeing a lot of success. In fact, was a financial teacher, a wealth teacher. And I just couldn't get it. I was in the space of like, man, I'm just like behind you as far as finances goes. It's always been my lowest kind of score on my life scoreboard. And it's been something I've really been trying to work on the last several years since it's become really aware to me. And so, personally right now, like my biggest focus is really growing my business and the way that I view my business, the way I view my worth, which we all know is deeply connected to our self-worth. Our net worth is so connected to our self-worth, what we believe we're valuable of, what we believe we're capable of and deserving of, right? The value we generate. And so I mentioned to you just over a voice note yesterday that I really admire the level of confidence you have in your product. And honestly, if you could run my business and talk about it more confidently, I'd be like, oh, let's go, man. Jump in there. I can be confident about everything in the world, but when it comes to my finances and my business, sometimes I'm just like, I don't talk about it the way that I really want to, So, I struggle with it, but at the same rate, right now, I can jump in and tell you that like the process that I take guys through, this is me leaning into it. Like the process I take guys through, like has been transformational, not only for me, but for the clients I've been working with, to first tap into this opening up part of yourself, this more feminine part of yourself, so that you can tap into more of the masculine parts of you. Right. So I can't heal the part that needs financial support without opening up to the fact that I'm actually here, right? That I'm there. I can't open up to that in order to step up until I open up. So that's one of the biggest things, man, is truly sorting out my finances, and my projections. And ultimately, I want to be the one who's providing most, if not all, the finances, at least for the first 5 years of our marriage, like where we're raising kids. And, I want my wife to be there. I don't want her to have to worry about anything like that. So I'm on this growth stage of like, let's go, like it's time to take the bull by the horns and not ditch my feminine side, just integrate it, integrate it and not be afraid of my masculine. I was kind of afraid of my masculine for a while there. So I think like the masculine part of me is the confident, assertive, direction oriented, not passive, not codependent, not people pleasing. I'm direct, I'm assertive, and I'm focused. I'm literally teaching a training on this right now. I have a 6-week course that's now available on tapping into assertiveness. So check that out. That's a great place to start.
Dude, well, I appreciate you sharing that with the group. And obviously, I know I'm biased, but we strongly believe that people's businesses and the success that they have in it is just most times a direct correlation to where they are at in their money story and their money journey. And so I hope that, with the work that we do together and the things that you've got going on your own end, that you continue to grow into that view of yourself is extremely valuable. Because you are, and I'm sure the audience agrees with that today. And so I'm also fairly certain you've got a couple of people that have juiced up and ready to go here. And so for those people that are listening and want to connect with you further, where can they find you? And yeah, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, Instagram's a great place. My name there is Q Williams with 2 underscores at the end. You can also check out my website, q-williams.com. You'll see information about the athletes work that I do on that website. You'll also see a lot of work with the men that I work with, a whole pick list of options. You can just book a call with me, book a discovery call if you're interested in the things that I'm doing and how I can possibly support you. There's a lot of different tiers to jump in at and explore. So yeah, shoot me a DM, shoot me an email on my website, and I'd love to connect with you.
It's awesome. I appreciate you being willing to do that, to take DMs from the audience and whatnot. And so for anybody listening, that's just an awesome opportunity to connect with an incredible human being, especially if you're leaning in to what Q is saying today. There's not anybody better out there to help you with the topics that he's talked about today. So do yourself a favor and at least gain a new friend and reach out to Q. And if you guys end up taking that relationship further, I promise you, y'all won't be disappointed. So with that said, Q, dude, thank you so much for coming on the show. Like I said, I have 7 questions I didn't get to. So that warrants a part 2. So for anybody that enjoyed this episode, don't worry, we'll get them on for a part 2 and then we'll go from there. So Q, thanks, brother. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Justin. Such a blast, man.